Right, well, we're talking about curriculum design. So I'm really excited to look at this work of what actually is curriculum. So this is just the refresher of what we did. Were you all there at the end of the summer?
No,
okay.
You guys were. I think just
So,
two of us. Yeah.
Well, that's okay. So, and you, hopefully this refreshes. I mean, the big conversation that we have is when we talk, when I work with districts is what is curriculum? And in the workshop, we did the whole exercise of what is not curriculum. And, the big misconception is programs. We have this program, we have this, blank. I think here it's journeys, right? People will say, well, we have journeys or we have this. And it's understanding that those aren't necessarily curriculum. And they might push it, salespeople might push it with that, but that's not curriculum. That's a resource to develop curriculum. So I forgot my pointer, and the shadows are going to be here. And you have access to all of this. So you have access to this whole slideshow on my website as we go through. So tinyurl.com/DCIUlit for the video in case they forget it. But typically, curriculum is referring to the knowledge and skills that students are expected to learn. And so this is learning standards. When we think about curriculum, we have the learning standards or learning objectives. We have units and lessons that teachers teach, assignments and projects, books, materials, videos, presentations, and then test assessments and other methods to use. And I like this, you'll all get the text, those that are writing it. All of my work really comes from Larry Ainsworth, rigorous curriculum design, because I worked in my old school district where I came from when I was an instructional coach and a teacher. When I left, we were in the middle of really revamping and redesigning the curriculum using his resources and then consultants from his company to help us design. So I like his definition that a rigorous curriculum is an inclusive set of intentionally aligned components, clear learning outcomes with matching assessments, engaging learning experiences, and instructional strategies, organized into sequenced units of study that serve as both the detailed roadmap and the high-quality delivery system for ensuring that all students achieve the desired end, the attainment of their designated grade or course-specific standards within a particular content area. And I think as you're looking at that, you're like, well, journeys might fit that or programs with this, but it's really understanding that those are resources to help you understand for your kiddos, where is this learning going? What are the standards that need to be achieved? How are we going to get there? And this is the work I did in the summer that we broke up into 2 days, and this is the work that the curriculum team that you'll be helping them on. It's these 5 main steps that Ainsworth says to lay the solid curricular foundation. So the first one is setting priority standards. The second one is naming the units of study. The third is assign standards to units of study. Fourth is create a pacing guide. And then 5 is to construct the unit planning organizer. And I put UBD here because I've done workshops on understanding by design, and schools will say, we want to do curriculum revamping, we want workshops on understanding by design. And understanding by design, the UBD, is great, but as you see in this, it doesn't come till step 5. There's a whole lot of work that needs to be done before that. And this is the order that you go in. So I know that we started a little bit last year, but I don't know if that was the curricular team, so I'm not sure where people are with it. And understanding for you all that, and the curricular team, that this is, as I always like to say, this is a marathon, not a sprint. This is baby steps. It sometimes takes 3 to 5 years to implement and design this full curriculum. Now I show this because we're going to talk about the first one, which is setting priority standards, which is probably what a good number of the work is going to be done in these days coming up, if they haven't done already. It's going to be setting priority standards. Now, as I said, my old school, so this is from my school, Dublin Unified School District in California, really high-achieving district that we kind of stopped and looked at, K-12, our curriculum of, I think, 4 or 5 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 1 high school. So when we talk about setting priority standards, this is the graphic that they came up with. that when you look at the standards, they're using Common Core in California, we have PA Core, but the same process would go, is that the grade level teams and content teachers will meet and decide in our grade level and our content, what are we considering essential or priority? And so for that, their take was that the standard had to have readiness, that it was going to prepare the student for the next level of learning, that it had to have leverage, that there was value in many disciplines. So it wasn't just English specific, it wasn't just social studies specific, it could be applied across. And that it had endurance, that there was value for life, long-lasting knowledge. So, any standards around critical thinking, interpretation, analysis. These are all kind of in the sphere of the big terms, college and career readiness, and of course, Larry Ainsworth and Bill Daggett with the rigor and relevance. So kind of under that umbrella. That these standards are not only going to have this kind of trifecta here, of the next level, cross-content, and then lifelong value. And that's really the starting point. This is another one, they kind of just segmented the college career rigor relevance. The same idea with that. So you feel free to use that. I asked some of my coaches about it. So the idea is, and this is again, that first step is setting the priority standard, is you have to help and you're going to work with the curriculum team to figure out what do we consider priority. So if you want to use that graphic with the three of, relevance, leverage, next steps, things like that. And then we think about, Larry Ainsworth and the consultants that we work with talked about this idea of, is the standard a fence post or a rail? And so the distinction between a fence post, is this something that is going to solidify the learning? Is this something that the fence post would be an essential standard, would be a priority standard? Because it has to be grounded in the ground, it has to be cemented, it has to be sturdy, and we need this one before we go to the next one. So is this something that we really have to hit home on? And then other standards, because they're not all going to be priority, and that's gonna, we're gonna say, all the standards are essential, and your job will be helping and coaching and working through with these teachers to help them really figure out through questioning, is this really essential? That we have to hit home, that we have to have these huge assessments on, that we have to spend a whole unit on? Or is it a rail, and as you see the rails, is it going to be kind of continuous throughout the year, across grade levels, across content areas? So for example, in ELA, I think of standards dealing with conventions and spelling. Those would be rail systems. We're not going to have one full unit and be done with it. That's one that's constantly going to keep coming up. We're constantly learning. We're constantly evolving with it. It's not necessarily a major one that we need right away. So that's kind of the idea that helps you get, is this something that we can thread through, that's going to seam across? And this is a cool visual, I think, just to help you get that idea. So what I did is, when we set priority standards, I had, we spent time, my colleague and I spent time with the grade level groups of actually talking in their content areas and grade levels. So we started that, like all the third grade teachers were talking together, all the fourth grade, so they're all talking. So first that conversation has to start. And I don't know how much it has been at each grade level, it's going to be different. But the first thing is that those content levels and grade levels would set their priority standards. They would just go through the standards, and at the beginning, they could list as many as they want. They could star them, they'll have them, just what do you consider priority right now? Then you bring that to the table as the conversation starter, and we're going to talk about two ways, horizontal and vertical alignment. There's no right or wrong way as far as, if I remember, Ainsworth might say something different, I forget, but it's kind of happening at the same time. You want to have alignment. So at some point, grade levels want to sit together across content. In elementary, it's a little easier. At the secondary level, it's going to be a little harder, but it's important and doable. That you're going to sit down, so for example, at the middle school level, you want to have all the sixth grade teachers and their content sit down and talk about what did they choose as their priority standards. So you want to see, where is their alignment? Where do we see ideas that are coming up in social studies and ELA, in science and math? And are there standards, priority standards that kind of go across all of them? And that's where conversation has to happen, that there's not going to be a right or wrong, but maybe some of the subject areas say this isn't really a priority for us, but it is in this content area. Or maybe they didn't realize, like maybe, for example, science had it as, a rail, but after conversation with the ELA and the social studies teachers, like, wow, this really needs to be a priority. So maybe they're bringing in more analysis, more critical thinking, more of the reading, interpretation into science because they see the value of it. So horizontal alignment is going to happen. So that's important at some point. And again, there's no necessarily set time. It's really how the teams are working well. What are they coming up to consensus on? Can they find priority standards that are across the content area? And that's going to be important to identify those. So this is a visual from NGSS. Are you familiar with that? That's kind of the new, that's Common Core's version of science. So in California, NGSS is taking off. Pennsylvania, I don't know, send us some tape, no one's going to watch it, a little lower. But they have their own kind of standards, and this is a visual of how it overlaps. So these are NGSS's science standards, and you see science, math, and ELA, and you see the area here that these standards would be priority across. And so building a strong base of knowledge through context-rich text, it's having that conversation. So science and math, no, gone are the days where that's the English teacher's job. We have this conversation to realize this is important for my content as well. And so they're each making it a priority, but it's understood that in our district, in our grade level, in 6th grade, this is going to be a priority standard that the students are getting hit with, not literally, that are getting hit with across the contents. And you see which ones would be just ELA and science, math, and then math and ELA. And it opens up that conversation, especially at the middle school level when you're working with those teachers. That's going to help bridge some gaps as well. So Nicole's just going to, Elementary will be a little easier because those teachers probably teach all the same subjects, so at least the conversations can go. And then the next part you want to have is vertical alignment. So again, deciding how you want to do it. I would start, probably would make sense with horizontal. Go horizontal first after you do content area, then we're meeting as a grade level team, and then we're going to look vertically. And so that's really important to have your kindergarten teachers and your 1st grade teachers in the same room talking to each other and sharing their priority standards. Middle school, 8th grade teachers, get those 9th grade teachers and have that conversation. 5th and 6th grade, that's a key, that's a pivotal year as well. The distinction between elementary and middle. So sitting down, but you of course would do this at every grade. And so kindergarten's kind of easy because they just have first. But first is going to be meeting with kindergarten and second. Second is meeting with first and third because you want to have that talk. You want to have that conversation about where's the vertical alignment. I'll never forget at the workshop last June, the 3rd grade team was talking and they came up after when we did this, we started to have just a few conversations and they had this big aha because I think we, I don't know if, oh wait, they didn't talk, but they went to the PDE SAS, the vertical viewer. I don't know how much you've used that, but we had them go on it, and 3rd grade had this big aha that one of these standards that they thought the kids were really weak in this year and they struggled was not in 2nd grade. This was the very first year that that standard was introduced. And we know that it's just, we're so overwhelmed with everything, we don't always have time to do that. But that's what I love at least about curriculum, that it really is designed by us, by the people, that we become the authors. And just like any of our lesson plans, when we author it, we own it. And so now, yeah.
When our grade 1 to 3 met over the summer and we looked at, we were amazed by the gradual changes, and just like you're saying, some areas where it just pops up into a grade. But even just to be, for our people to be aware deeply of those gradual changes, how it's main idea, then it's main idea in details, then it's, and how it just continues to grow. It was one of the most powerful things I think we did.
Right. And I mean, this is why it's so important. That connectiveness, the conversation, as you said, they lead to awareness of complete standard process. So now you have a bigger understanding. The collaboration leads to development K-12 programs. So implementing programs K-12, why? It helps with assessment where you're going and data analysis across grade levels of now having the understanding of where they're supposed to be coming from, where they are now, and where they're going. And it's giving teachers that bigger picture of a student in Southeast Delco. When they come in K, these are the main things that they're hitting, and this is the progression that they're taking. Because we're all part of that journey. And so it's helping teachers realize it's not just this chunk. It really is the life of this kiddo, this educational life. So thank you for sharing that about how that happened. And why vertically aligned? It puts an emphasis on essential skills and knowledge. It is also a reduction in the overloaded curriculum. So when people think like, oh, journeys, I have so much to teach, or there's so much one setting priority, you're prioritizing. But then having that conversation, you can almost rest assured of like, okay, I don't have to hit this super hard. This is a rail, because next year, in the standard, it turns into a post. So I'm okay that they're still gonna have some flaws, or they might not master this yet, because I know next year they're going to get it. Or it helps you set that priority of like, by the end, they really need to have this, so I need to put more emphasis rather than what I did. Again, that whole idea of a unified perspective and focus, of having a clear vision. The authors of a curriculum have a clear vision of where a child in Southeast Delco is going. And it makes sense of how they're gonna get there. And everybody with the priority standards, the horizontal alignment, it's all hands on deck too. I like that. So that was the first one. So that was step number one. So it's gonna depend on where the grade levels are. So as you're working with those teachers, really helping them setting priority, having the conversations about why, facilitating the horizontal alignment, and then making sure that there's the chance for that conversation for vertical alignment. All right, so now that's done. So now you have your priority standards. The next thing that Ainsworth says is you would name the units of study. So, as he said, the most common form to organize instruction assessment is a unit of study. These are lessons based around the priority standards. It's downloaded differently, so the font's all wacky. So you're like, Jamie, why are some things capitalized and some things aren't? It's not, I know. This is really important, and I think as you get to the secondary level, this is key to know about when we look at the units of study, identifying their purpose and their dominant focus throughout the unit. So, one way to look at it is topical. So a specific portion of a larger subject or discipline. So you can have a unit of study that is focused on solids and liquids. You can have a unit of study that's kinetic energy, 2- and 3-dimensional shapes for math, a unit on literary devices, or a unit on narrative writing. So it's topical. Now, when you're going through and when you're reinforcing these, if you choose one, it doesn't have to be every unit of study has to fit that. It's a choice, but it's one of these three. So the first one is topical. This is your unit of study, like we're really gonna do a unit on solids and liquids. This is really important, talking about the standard that we really wanna hit literary devices. All right? Then the next one is skills-based. So this is emphasizing application. So maybe the unit, the focus is on regrouping. Maybe it's converting fractions to decimals, it's interpreting an author's intent, applying before, during, after reading strategies. Maybe it's that, it's the application, it's skills. That's the second one. And then the third one that you can choose is thematic. So it's broader in nature, it emphasizes connections to other topics within the same different discipline. So maybe it's life cycle, maybe it's transformations, maybe it's human movement. And this is really cool when you have that horizontal conversation. How cool would it be at your middle school if the team, as they're going over their priority standards, decide, let's do a thematic unit of study together. let's have one unit where we're going to focus on human movement. And you could talk about in ELA, maybe you're reading, I don't think you would, but you would be reading Steinbeck, right? Like Grapes of Wrath, like traveling across the country. You're reading short stories about immigration and things like that. Maybe in social studies, you're talking about colonizations, right? At the 8th grade, if you're talking about the colonies. And then maybe in science, human movement, you're talking, parts of the body, kinesthetic, you're bringing that kinesthetic energy in, things like that. So see, there again, the kids are, and that would be really cool, maybe the same priority standards there. Now this is important to note, and when we get to the secondary level for our ELA teachers, as much as this is where we're a growth mindset, this is where you reinforce growth mindset, units we do not base, we base on literary skills and elements, not on books or stories. So when the teacher says, right to the camera, when the teacher says, I have to teach this book, no you don't, right? Because we cling on to that, it's that comfort. There has to be based around skills and literary elements. And you choose what novel works well for your kiddos, their ability level, all of that. And that's a big thing. So again, you're choosing one of those three, and it's a mix and match, whatever it is. It's topical, skills-based, and thematic. So those were the three. Once you've done that, the next step, the third step then, is you've chosen the priority standards, then you're going to assign those units to, you're going to assign those standards to that unit. So Ainsworth says we follow these steps, match priority standards to each of the units by focusing on the unit's main central core idea, right? So if we're doing thematic human movement, you'd have to say, well, what is the priority standard that goes along with that? Then you would also select supporting standards that connect to and enhance the priority standards. So when we see PS here, that's priority standards. So that can be taught in conjunction with PS and or match the unit. So if you did skills-based and you did narrative writing, you're going to bring in those supporting standards about conventions and maybe transitions and things like that. And this is important. Distribute priority standards across more than one unit of study. This exposes students to standards in various applications, and it makes sure that we transfer and extend their understanding. So if we've deemed it priority, it should make its appearance in more than one unit. And this is where, when you get to the secondary level where they're contained in their departments, that's where that conversation is important to have. And to really talk about it, like, okay, I hit this in ELA. When are they going to see it in science? When are they going to see it in social studies? To think about what units they're going to be in as they go through. Where are you assigning it? So keeping that conversation open. According to Ainsworth, when we distribute the priority standards, it enables all students to reinforce their understanding. And then here's this one. It says, determine whether or not a priority standard can or needs to be reinforced in other units. So this is the idea of he's saying spread it around. So I took this quotation right from him to say, students need to be able to enter the next level of learning. Now this is not necessarily a grade level. This is the next unit. This is the next quarter. This is the next whatever. They need to enter that next level of learning with a solid understanding of each priority standard from the level before. If this cannot be achieved during one unit of study only, then assigning that priority standard to one or more additional units is necessary. If you know the kiddos are going to need more than one shot to get this, you have to make sure you lay that out properly. All right? So to help as you're going through this, about an average of 3 or 4 priority standards per unit. But it really depends on the unit, depends on the time of year, depends on the nature of it. If they're, I like this, if helping your teachers, if you feel like, oh, we have too many priority standards in this, consider breaking up into 2 different ones. All right? I don't know if it says, but UBD, and in this, and we'll jump there, but to talk about it earlier, about 2 to 6 weeks. Each unit of study should be about 2 to 6 weeks. No less than 2, no more than 6. So if you're getting 6 and you're like, we have so many, maybe break it up into 2 smaller ones. If a priority standard will reappear in other units, it may not need to be addressed in that one unit. So if you know it's going to come later, and that's where a conversation, it could be just a little taste of it, an intro, so maybe it's not even a priority standard. This is really important, and we'll get there, but pacing calendars help avoid priority standard heavy units. So having a pacing calendar, and this is where and I know this is where we're breaking the habit too of some things, that pacing calendars are works in progress and are units improving student achievement, and if they're not, we revise as necessary. So understanding that once they create these units, then you gotta take it on a test run. And as you're living it, just like we would on a lesson plan, as you're going through that unit of study, if it's not working, we revise. So everything is work in progress. So I think also reassuring your curriculum team, and then when they go and present it to the teachers or whatever the rollout's going to be, just emphasize that it's a living, breathing document. It's a work in progress. We want your feedback. We want to know pacing. We want to know all of that. So after that, once you all have your units and you lay out, you prepare a pacing calendar. So a pacing calendar is, of course, the year-long or course-long schedule for delivering the planned units. It ensures that students learn standards, and this is important, in the right order. So now you've identified the units of study, you know the order they're going in. And again, that horizontal conversation about what it looks like, even the vertical. There are, of course, people have different views, as you know. Some people like it because it helps them stay on track. So the positive of a pacing calendar is it's telling me where I need to go. Others feel the anxiousness of, oh, I have to keep up, I'm not doing too much. Again, reinforcing, and then whoever is Kim 2.0, whatever the next version is, you all kind of reinforcing that as we're going through that this is a guide, this is not a mandate. So, if you're a day or 2 off, that's okay. If you're 2 weeks off, then we need to figure it out, all right? And it addresses, again, learning progressions, the pacing calendar. How much time are we going to need for this standard? And again, thinking about that priority standard, what's being hit in fall when they come in, and where's that priority standard again? Is it then in winter, it's going to be in another subject, but it's reinforced there, and in spring, it's reinforced here. So we know the progression. I really like this, and we did this in our school. Larry Ainsworth talks about creating a buffer week, and this is what he calls scheduled breathing room. So curriculum designers, when you're looking at the pacing calendar, need to build into the schedule short intervals between the units of study. Really building it in our calendars, it was grayed out. And it could look, depending on the content, the nature of it, it could be from a few extra classes to a whole week. And so what happens here are the 3 areas that we look at. When we finished a unit of study and the kids are not really doing well with it, we intervene for those that are far from proficiency. So maybe in this grade out, maybe we have a day or 2 between a unit of study. We've taken the final assessment, we've kind of evaluated where all the students are, we've gauged their learning. And let's say that this is a priority standard, we've come to the end, like we are not going to see this standard again this year, but it's still really important. Well, then maybe there's 2 days built in where those kiddos are pulled, and this is flexibility, and this is where we have the growth mindset. We're open to the possibility of, well, those aren't my kids. Yes, they are. All of them are. So you might take this group, but I'm going to take this group, and we're going to mix and match. You intervene for those that are far from proficient. You remediate students who are almost proficient. And for those students that are proficient or advanced, you enrich. You don't move on to something else. It's not study hall. It's not that. And again, it all goes back again to growth mindset, that learning in progress. How are you rolling out to the kiddos? So we're all getting stronger with ideas. So it's the way we talk to them that, wow, this really came easily to you, or you really worked hard and you understood this. Now let's push ourselves a little more. Before we go into this new one, let's try this challenge. Let's see what we can do. It is difficult, absolutely, to figure this out, but it's doable. As long as you give realistic time frames as you're thinking about the priority standards, how much time do we need, all that, take into account learning progressions? Is it going to take grade level and age levels? Are they going to need more time for this? Are they going to need less time? And it provides some flexibility in it. And I don't know how much control that will be of you, at least advising on it, but where you can, putting in those buffers. And then you go on to the construct the unit organizer. And so basically, Larry Ainsworth, this is where you would get into UBD, but Larry Ainsworth says, again, it's this living, breathing. This is where its curriculum is birthed by you. You ask yourself 3 questions if you're going to do a template. Are you going to use one standard template that everybody's going to follow to come up with their units, or are you going to use several? So he says 3 questions. Should we have one universal template representing all of the brainstorm components to ensure consistency across content areas? So we're going to have one universal to rule them all at Southeast Delco. This is our unit planner. Or do you want to have some flexibility in the template design? So as long as all of the agreed upon components or elements are included. So do you want to have maybe a universal elementary, a universal middle, a universal high? Are there going to be non-negotiables that these all have to go in your unit planning templates? And then here are some that are mix and match, you choose. And there's supposed to be number 3 here. Shall we agree to try out different templates in different grade spans and content areas in order to see which one works best for achieving? And those templates are important because, again, this living, breathing document, you want to have that roadmap. So any teacher that comes in, a new teacher has this roadmap. It doesn't have to be every single detailed lesson plan of how you do it, but a general idea of this is where we're going. These are the learning targets. These are the standards we're hitting. This is the, focusing on this quadrant of the framework. This is how I'm hitting this. These are different learning activities you could do for this. This is our technology. This is where you would identify resources. So here are 3 stories from Journeys, and this is the cool thing. Like you have Journeys, but then it becomes a resource. So Journeys has said, you should go this way. But with curriculum design, you say, you know what? Not for our kiddos or not the way we want them to learn and progress. So it's a great resource, but we all don't have to be on page 7 on this day. So here are a bunch of stories. They're in this unit that Journey says covers this, but they actually work really well in this other unit. So, and you might have it in your template, in your planner. Here are suggested studies, or here are suggested readings to do, things like that.
Do you have examples of templates? Because this is something that has come up in our meetings, because we don't have a consistent template right now.
Those, I think, and my colleague has borrowed the book. Is this,
Okay.
did we do it here? That's common form of assessment. Did she get this one, or did she get rigorous curriculum? There are in the book.
Oh, there, okay.
Yeah. So he gives some suggestions with that.
Okay.
But a lot of it's like, and again, it's that whole conversation. But that's where, again, it's going to be, it's a process. And there's going to be a lot of voices heard, but it's also understanding where can we be flexible with that. Then the next portion of this kind of goes into UBD, but these are the 5 main steps. I won't really talk about UBD just yet, but when you go to my curriculum site, so if you go to my tinyurl.com/DCIUlit, under curriculum design alignment, so this presentation is up here. There's also a link to resources, but then, and I was supposed to take it down last year, and I never did. So if this is just on the Southeast Delco YouTube channel, there is a PDF version of Understanding by Design, the most up-to-date one, the full-on thing. So if you don't want to buy the book. So that has suggestions of templates, but then again, looking and saying, well, where are we? What do we decide? Is this a universal one? Does this look great, or are there non-negotiables? And that's bringing in the curriculum people, and then maybe rolling out, say, hey, we thought about these. What do you think? And again, maybe you try it one, maybe we're going to try universal one year, and it's like, you know what? Not really working so well. So maybe let's revise it for next year. So that is curriculum design, like right in a nutshell. But really, so again, just kind of hitting home these, as I try to find it here. you're really looking at these 5 steps. And everyone's probably going to be at different places, but I don't know exactly your role, but again, as coaching and supporting them, driving, as we talked about, through questioning, this is really the number one. Learn the standards as much as we don't want to, they guide us. My colleague who's doing some of this work at another school, it's a private school, I don't know if it's the name of it. But they're like, well, we don't want to follow, we're looking at curriculum design, but we don't have to follow the state standards. It's like, okay, but you have to have some standards. You have to be able to say, as a 4th grader, these are the major skills or things you understand. Like, I was just like, you have to have some, because that drives curriculum. It's the number one. You have to say, these are the priority. That's gonna open up a lot of conversation, so I think those first few days, you probably might get here, setting them, again, like content and grade to start, then open it up to horizontal, and then that vertical. And as Beth said, we talked about this, that really that vertical conversation is crucial. And it's really important, especially for you folks, this kind of unified front. So I don't know how many people from each of your site are represented on the curriculum. I think making sure at least everybody does, hopefully you all do. But really, and I think if something you can do is, before you do all this, you definitely can set norms of really emphasizing it for the kiddos, emphasizing it big picture, and give a hypothetical that at any point, let's say you can get pulled out and go teach a different building, a different grade level. Here, at least there's going to be a roadmap in place. That there's at least a comfort for teachers, a clear plan for the kiddos, that we know from K to 12 where they're going and how they're getting there. So this will take some time, and then again, next unit is naming the units. Those 3: topical, skills-based, thematic, not by novel, and then once you do that, assigning. And again, during these 2 periods, especially at the middle school level, bring those teams together to just see what they have. To just, even if you have on a board or put up a Google Doc on here, because it's important to say like, hey, science, we're hitting this priority standard in English at the same time. Do we want to stagger it, or do we want to try to have a thematic and let's build? That would be really cool. Maybe they decide as teams that we're going to have at least, we're not going to do it consistently, but we can do it like maybe 3 times a year. We're going to have the same theme, that these kiddos are going to be hit with the same concept. And maybe it's different standards too. That's what then the teacher decides of, does this standard work for this one or not? And it might not. So it might be, are we hitting the standard at the same time across everybody, or are we covering the same theme and we're getting different standards? And but the kids can do like a huge project that's cross-curricular, and we can use all of it in all the classes. Pacing guide, and then you decide, now that we have it, going back to the units, and then how do we design the units? So what's our roadmap going to be for each unit? Do we have questions? I just want to stop at that. I don't know. Probably just maybe hit record again. Peace. No, take that off now. I just said that too. But I don't know if you want to record. I mean, if you want to keep your questions on there, but do you have questions? Do you have conversations? There should just be a
little